Hello and welcome back to the InterDrone podcast, 30,000 foot view of the commercial drone industry. My name is CJ Smith. It is Wednesday, February 24th, joined today with Michael Peel, InterDrone chairman, and two fantastic guests with us today coming all the way from Europe. Eszter Kovacs, founder of DroneTalks and Manageld, and Lorenzo Murzilli. He's the founder and CEO at Murzili Consulting. Really excited to have them on today. Just like every episode, we'll talk about a couple articles from the past week. We're going to talk about EHang. We're going to talk about a fruit picking drone, and then we're going to talk about the importance of drone education. And then we're going to dive into DroneTalks and the newly kind of launched DroneTalks Academy, which has a couple of courses online that Lorenzo is heading up as the head instructor. So really excited to talk to them a little bit more about drone education and what they're doing over there. But before we jump into that, can I have both of you guys introduce yourselves? Talk a little bit about what you do, how you got into the drone space, and what's kind of top of mind for you guys at DroneTalks right now.
Yes, hi everyone, I'm Eszter Kovacs, as CJ mentioned before, and I think I was enough lucky, already had a podcast with CJ and Mike like a few months ago, so the audience may know me. My background is basically engineering. I'm a safety engineer, and following on successfully completed my degree, I spent 10 fantastic years at telcos, leading different technology, Internet of Things, and drone initiatives. In the last 4 years, I was working on how to integrate 4G, 5G cellular network to drone operations, and I led a working group of that for GSMA, which is an association of telcos. So we work on how drones can use cellular technology and can be integrated to airspace. So I led that program. And following on that, I set up my own agency where we are a full service management agency focused on PR and program management of drone companies. And recently I became the acting secretary general of the Global UTM Association actually now a founder of DroneTalks and the DroneTalks Academy, which we'll talk about later on. So long story short, happy to be here. Always big fan of InterDrone and the hosts. So yeah maybe
thank you so
Lorenzo.
much for being here. Lorenzo?
Yes, hi everybody. Also from my side, Lorenzo Murzilli. I'm an aerospace engineer, by education. Worked in the manned aviation space or vintage aviation, the way you want to call it, for a few years as a safety engineer, and then as a safety manager for different kind of products, both military and civil. And then I transitioned into the authority space. So I crossed the fence once to go to the authority, work with the Swiss Federal Office of Civil Aviation, all the way through becoming the manager there of the Innovation Digitalization Unit, which basically was the unit in charge of everything drones, UTM, integration, you name it. It's very similar to what in the US is the UAS Integration Office, with J. Merkel, kind of, the flavor was something like that. And very recently jumped the fence back, from the authority back into the industry side. Opened up my consulting company and helping those who I think will succeed in succeeding. That's
okay.
my current occupation.
Great. Yeah, I mean, education in the industry, I think, as almost all of us are aware, is extremely important. So we're extremely grateful for the work that you guys are doing. We are taping this live, so if anybody's tuning in, please say hello, drop a comment, say where you're tuning in from, and if you have any questions, please send those to us as well, and we'll get those answered. If you're not tuning in for the first time, you know that we talk about a couple articles every week. And just before we hopped on live, Eszter and Lorenzo were talking about some developments in the EU with regards to Usespace. So I would love for you guys to kind of catch us up to speed on what happened today.
Yeah, I can take this one. I mean, today is kind of a big day in Europe as far as what in the US is known as UTM, or in Europe, again, is known as Usespace, because the news is that the Usespace regulation has been approved. And with that means it will enter into force in a couple of years now. And what that means is that we're going to have Usespace airspaces in Europe, right? And within these Usespace airspaces, we're going to have services like network remote ID, flight authorization, traffic information, geo awareness, and all additional stuff such as weather information that will certainly, be combined together in an effort to finally allow the widespread BVLOS dream, right? That everybody is thinking about day and night everywhere in the world. So I think Europe took this important step. As usual, it's a compromise. Being European Europe is a compromise between different positions, but it seems to be a good compromise for one. So it's very good news.
Yeah, I may also pop in my mind. I am a very business-oriented person. And as I see companies, UTM companies, other ecosystem players had a really uncertain situation nowadays because of the COVID, and regulation was not out there. They didn't see how long they need to invest money before the return starts. And with this Usespace regulation approved, there is some certainty now in Europe. Companies, see the light. In the end of the tunnel, and in 2 years, BVLOS and Usespace is going to be reality, can make revenue, and they have 2 years to build up, their business models now. So I think it's a really, really big step towards a direction of stabilize businesses and, get some uncertainty in the air. Yeah.
So I only have one question because I heard the word network attached to remote ID. How far ahead do you think this puts Europe in comparison to where the United States is with the FAA?
Now that's the first.
I say that with love. I say that with love. If any FAA people are listening.
I have a lot of FAA friends, and so
be careful.
Right? No, I think that to some extent, let's say, how do I do this politically? So to some extent, there was slightly different objectives. So what I heard from the FAA perspective is their idea was to try and maximize the compliance with any remote ID regulation. And in order for the bad actors, to pop up, because there would be so few that, they would be immediately evident. So they're trying to capture the 99.999% of operators by making a regulation which is as simple as possible, like, and as cheap as possible, as light as possible for maximizing, compliance with it, right? In the Usespace regulation, I think the objective is slightly different because that is a regulation that has to do with air traffic management, if you want, because the Usespace is actually an airspace in Europe. It's not just, a set of services. It will be an airspace that member states can actually create. And inside this airspace, drone operations can operate. And therefore, within this context, the network remote ID, of course, has the benefits of, being, linked to connectivity. Connectivity, you have, several things that go along network remote ID, right? So I think that the flavor of the two is, the objectives of the two were slightly different. And I'm pretty confident that even in the US, moving forward in the direction of like more traffic management, regulation geared towards traffic management, the network remote ID will come back up, right, as a way to, facilitate operations. So that's my politically correct answer to your question, Mike.
Yeah.
So just kind of also a follow up to go back to the European side, because like you said, there's a lot more member states that have to communicate. So it's not just a kind of drop down effect like we have here. So what were the compromises, and why do you still think this is a big leap? Like how were you able to get there with all the compromises?
I can take it first. So, there are a lot of players in Europe. And when I'm saying that, because as you mentioned, there are the member states, every member state has a different ANSP, has a different government, has different startups, so it's so diverse. And I think the key is when you make decisions, they kind of different associations represented themselves and their business needs and their their technological needs. So there is this big push from ANSPs. There was another big push from industry. There was other big push from different other associations. And I think the magic which happened here is kind of the end solution serves all of them somehow. And this is I think the key, because it's not saying clearly it's federated or not federated. It says the member states can kind of tailor it to the best of their needs. So I think this is a big takeaway here. Yeah, I'm not sure if Lorenzo agrees with that.
In one word is the notion of being flexible, right? That the challenge with European regulation, every time you try to lock down one specific decision, there you need to have at least a majority, right? Otherwise it doesn't work. And in the case of the regulation, exactly as Eszter said, there were several conflicting, needs and or requirements. So the regulation will ultimately allow flexibility to the member states to decide. A good example would be, for example, for the Central Information Service, or what is known more or less as the FIMS, right? There were endless debates whether this has to be provided by a single entity or by multiple entities, right? If it has to be a single source of truth, or if it could be federated also as an information service, even if it's a Central Information Service. And ultimately, the regulation says, well, the member states can decide. If in a member state you want to have it centralized, you can do that. But if you want to have it decentralized, you can do that as well. Right, and then how do you manage the interfaces between that is more of a interoperability kind of question, which goes back into a technical aspect of the implementation of the regulation. So the truth is that in Europe, member states really have different needs, right? So it's very difficult to impose one model to everybody. But at the same time, I think what Eszter is saying is correct, that to some extent everybody has different needs, but everybody has needs, right? So not doing nothing is not an option.
Right.
And so people are willing to compromise, because with compromise comes progress, right? So yes, I might have my own ideas, but I need to compromise, otherwise you get stuck and nobody can fly BVLOS, right? So that's the bottom line, nobody can scale.
So do you think the network solution helps that interoperability for, I guess, reasons of being able to scale solutions, to be able to actually custom tailor rather than it just being a signal on and off with broadcast?
So I take it, work 10 years.
Sorry, I'm tough question, Mike here.
We're just getting started.
His life here. He will invite me for a beer after that. So spent 10 fantastic years at telcos working on different solutions. Yes and no. I think, depends on the need. So telcos can provide a lot of added value services, which I think at the moment we haven't talked about yet enough. So it's not just, the drone gonna fly BVLOS and cellular. That's one thing. But if the telcos really start to take serious this business opportunity in drones, I tell you a real example. Based on where are the SIM cards, the telcos has this data. They can tell you where are the crowd. And they can tell you, okay, they can risk mitigate with the crowd. There is a huge crowd of people here based on the SIM cards, we know. And don't fly there, because if you crash, there is a high risk operation. Fly another direction. So they have so much more added value services opportunities if this drone flies on cellular, just BVLOS, So that was one example, but I can tell another example. For example, if an accident happens, they can analyze based on the cellular data. It was really the cellular data dropped off or something else happened. So you can backlog everything and you can after analyze, what exactly happened there. So there is a lot of added value services, which I think is good. On the other hand, I think depends what's your need and do you really need to use cellular or not? Do you really need these added value services or not to fly to A to B and deliver in short range something? Maybe you don't need this. Maybe you don't need to get that other extra service. And so I think it depends on your needs. This is how I would reply on this question. I'm not sure, Lorenzo.
Yeah, I think I agree, and it's almost like it was kind of hinted into the FAA, the NPRM, of the remote ID rule when they were discussing about the network. It was this idea that the network is not good as such, right? Network makes sense because it makes use of connectivity, and connectivity can be used for other things. So the key question is whether you want to go through that process of putting everybody on a network because you think it makes sense because they will use these additional other services and the value-added services, or not because it's still early, and a broadcast solution is good enough if your objective is only to identify a drone at short, in at short distance, right? So I think my understanding, my opinion is that moving forward, having connectivity will certainly be an asset versus not having connectivity. But what is not, I think, my opinion, what I think is that you will not want to mandate connectivity in arguing that it is a must, otherwise you cannot fly BVLOS, right? Because there are several companies that are currently flying in BVLOS that can do that safely without having a super safe connectivity. So the way I like to frame is that network, remote ID, connectivity enables the creation of value-added services that include safety services if so needed, right? But I wouldn't spin it around and saying if you don't have that, then you cannot fly safely, BVLOS, because there could be other ways to do that, right? So that's kind of like how you compromise between the two different views.
Mm-hmm. Right, because the being attached to the network is not the only way to mitigate risk with the drone. There's other fail-safe systems.
Exactly.
Yes, but cellular is good for other added value services, which is the case. And I imagine a world where we are technological neutral. We can use any technology for any purposes, but of course it's not exist. So. That would be a good.
What do you guys, and this could be for even you too, Mike, but what do you guys think about this means for companies or who are producing aircraft that are going to be sold in Europe and in the United States? Does this create new challenges trying to comply with these two different standards?
I wonder if it changes what type of drones they build. Does this become like advantageous for fixed wing? Because then they're, BVLOS is now on the horizon a lot sooner.
Right. Well, we see more of those. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, we have seen, network and broadcast, in my previous life, when we did the, demonstration for the network remote ID ASTM standard here in Switzerland, right? We have seen the two standards deployed. And I think it's easy enough, let's say, politics aside, like it's easy enough to implement both solutions for drone manufacturers that are serious about it, right? Then, of course, there's the question of the cost, who pays, whatever. But the bottom line is, I think from a technological standpoint, it is very easy enough to implement both. And, with the regulation in place, that's not going to be an option anymore, right? So if you want to fly in a Usespace airspace, you will have to be connected. And that's it, and therefore, I'm sure that all the drone manufacturer will react to that and simply allow that to happen, as simple as that.
Right. Well, really interesting stuff. Always a lot to unpack, I feel like, every week. Don't forget, if you're tuning in live, please send us some questions, or at least a comment, or say hello. And if you do have a question, we'll try to get those answered for you. So we talk about a couple articles every week on the podcast. One article I really want to talk to you about this week is with regards to EHang. So Chinese drone maker EHang disputes a Wolfpack, which is a kind of a short selling company, their report, which slams their business practices. EHang has hit back at the reports by short seller that EHang's business is, quote, an elaborate stock promotion built on largely fabricated revenues based on sham sales contracts. EHang is an autonomous passenger drone company founded in 2014. The company made headlines over years for the promise of self-flying taxis that went public in New York in 2019. So I do think it's at least worth noting that the company that published this report, they're a short selling organization, which means they try to find companies that are either engaging in bad business practices or that they don't think will succeed. So they have a little bit of an interest in this. And so I'm not going to ask any of the guests here to comment on the validity of these claims, but just more importantly, what do you guys make of the whole kind of self-flying taxi market? I think we see a lot of headlines about this in mainstream media, and even though it's not really a part of the drone industry, which is which is common practice right now, I can't take an air taxi anywhere right now if I wanted to. There are all these other drone use cases that are currently being used that maybe don't get as much attention. But whoever wants to jump into this, what do you guys think about kind of the AAM market? Do you think it's as big as kind of some of the headlines make it out to be?
Oh, I think there's, I'm kind of tepid on AAM because I think a lot of the focus has been on kind of, I want to say the hype, of the idea of a flying car, right. Where we're really kind of just talking about automated systems in helicopter-like vehicles. Perfect example is the kind of multi-rotor setup, which doesn't necessarily seem functional on some of these. And also they'll have them at like knee level. So extremely dangerous there. I'm just concerned about seeing more headlines like this because it's not the only drone IPO. And it might set bad precedents or bad feelings for how people perceive the drone industry at large, when there actually are many profitable companies that are working really hard and they have real actual business cases. And I think the one to keep an eye on right now is the Measure IPO. I'm pretty sure that's coming around the pike. So I think this was a bad hit on the PR. But ultimately, I don't think it was a hit at actual progress for UAM, AAM at all, because most of the hard work is being done outside the headlines anyway.
Right.
Allow me to put back for a second my former regulator hat and say that, let's say, US, like the FAA will take care of that. Like, meaning if you have a hype, the hype is not going to go through the rigorous process of certification of aircraft, right? That applies no matter what, right? So to some extent, you can play around the way you want until you hit that barrier. But when you hit that barrier, the game is over, right? You're going to have to show that you can go through a rigorous certification process in the United States. If you want to fly in Europe, the same story with the EASA. Safety requirements levied against these products are fairly high. I've seen numbers that are kind of like, wow, this is very high standard. And I think if there is a hype, that's where the hype is going to end. Now, the good thing is that this process is ongoing, right? There are aircrafts currently being certified. They are through the certification pipeline, and you will see clearly those that are going to come out of it and those that's not going to come out of it, And so I think that as far as, clearing the air from if there is any scam, any company that is not serious, anything that is not going to work, that process will actually take care of that pretty aggressively pretty soon. And it will almost like it will drive a consolidation, which we are already seeing now in the drone industry, post-COVID, at large. And I think it will drive a consolidation also in this space, right? And we will see that happening, I think, in the coming 1 or 2 years, probably.
And
sorry, you go.
So in my opinion, I'm going to be really, really on the point. Listen, Uber promised by 2025, I think I went 2 years ago to Portland to the Connected Skies event, and it was on the screen, 2025, air taxi is going to fly. And what happened? I think these PR numbers and years in forecasting, I think they come, but I don't think so that soon as people forecast. That's my short opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of infrastructure that has to get put in place for especially the urban case, right?
Yeah.
Retrofitting old helipads, charging stations at airports, things like this that I don't think a lot of people are considering coming in. I've always directed people to Mike Blade's UAM talk or UAM panel at InterDrone. He usually has one. And I even met a VC in the hall one day that I was really excited about it. I was like, come along here and you'll get a taste of the reality. There's just a lot that has to go into it to happen. And I think now that Uber is no longer part of the conversation equation, I think we could speak honestly about them being concerned about not being a profitable company and trying to make the case that they have other avenues. I remember 2-3 years prior to that, they were talking about getting into ambulatory logistics. So as if that was a giant market that they were going to suddenly invade and disrupt just because they figured out how to get cars to pick me up at late hours of the night. So I think that ultimately, though, we did gain the benefit of a lot of attention, and they did put investment. I mean, they weren't half kidding. They were serious about it, if not delusional about their path to success. And I think it did at least help move the use case forward. So if it's not 25, at least it'll be 2030 rather than 2050.
Yeah. And on the other hand, I think one aspect which people forgot about, someone need to sit on this air taxi and fly. So I think we all love drones. We all love UAM. We all, passionate about flying and aviation. But end of the day, it's social acceptance. So people need to order that air taxi on the mobile app, sit in it, and fly. And I think this social acceptance is not there yet. So we still have complaints about flying drones, and worrying about privacy, noise, and everything else. And it's a total other story when someone needs to order it and sit in these flying automated machines. So this is why I'm always say this 25 is a little bit brave, So I think this is the other aspect what companies needs to work on, this social acceptance, even if they get the approval, even if technologically all fine, they need the users, and where are the users currently, even if we have difficulties to accept a small drone deliver a cafe, so.
Yeah, still some work to be done, definitely.
Maybe to end on a slightly positive note, I think, my positive note is that, again, the process of certification, or if you want, the requirement that a company such as a UAM company has to become an aviation company, right, is probably what you mentioned before, Mike. Sometimes you don't even understand what that means, right, if you're not an aviation company. And you tend to, find shortcuts and solutions that might work in other industries, right? But at the end of the day, there is this wall, right? And you have to go through that. It's not, you cannot just go around. You need to find a way to become an aviation company. And the positive note that I wanted to bring is that I am speaking with some of these companies, right, that are creating and developing products in this space. And few of them are actually aviation companies. They employ, the right people. They speak the right language. They have the right mindset, the right time frames, the right understanding of the challenges of certification and continued airworthiness, the challenges of operating these machines, the challenges of, facing accident investigations because accident can happen. And so there is, in my opinion, there is more than hope. There is a new industry which is coming up, right? That is serious, but it's going to come up exactly to the point of Eszter, not in the times, of, a quick, maybe software, startup, but it's going to come up with the timing of an aviation company. And we know in aviation to decertify a product is 5 years, the entry into service without delays. So these are the timings we need to speak about. And on top of that, of course, your point, Mike, is correct, is that we are trying to do that on top of an infrastructure that doesn't exist yet. So we need to also design an aviation-like infrastructure, because you can say, I want to land on the roof of a building, but ask any helicopter pilot that does that on a daily basis is not something easy. You cannot just do it like this. There is a million of things that go into the design of that heliport, for example, or helipad, that makes it so expensive and so challenging. So to me, the real answer is there an industry there? Yes, there is, right? Absolutely. People are investing money. There are bright talents and products are emerging that technologically can make it, but it is an aviation industry, right? And with that goes all the complexities and, the certification, the safety requirements that are attached to that. And that cannot be shortcutted. There cannot be a shortcut. And that's the challenge. So timing, think about a little bit more into the future, not now.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think there's a lot of talent also invested. I don't think people realize how many components are being developed at different kind of rates. And for example, electric engines. And that can have a place on current aircraft before it becomes a utility for AAM. Autopilot developments, also developments that we have for small drones in terms of obstacle avoidance, all that gets to get purchased wholesale and easily by AAM when it gets to the right point. So I think everybody knows it's that point in the future that we're going to get to. The question is the hows and the whys. Mm-hmm. And I think you're totally correct. It's going to be serious players because of that kind of baptism by fire that has to happen to get large aircraft in the sky and have them flying safely.
Right. Yeah, and building them in tandem with the infrastructure, like you said, Lorenzo.
Yeah.
Switching gears just a little bit, we're going to talk about a drone with a slightly different payload. In the second article, so Tevel Technologies builds fruit picking drones, improving efficiency. Israeli-based company Tevel Technologies uses AI-driven drones to pick fruit from trees as the pandemic is shutting down farms worldwide and leaving fruit to rot. The fruit picking drones are equipped with a grabber, an array of forward-facing cameras, and a soft bumper to keep the plants from getting chopped up in the rotors, obviously. The camera array uses an algorithm that knows the characteristics of ripe fruit. In this case, the drone gently grabs an apple and twists it and drops it into the apple bin and continues until it's full. So I thought this is kind of a cool article. My big question here is, we've been seeing this in tech. This is not new for technology, right? Technology is kind of essentially replacing jobs. And so if we're looking at this from that angle, if these drones are going to potentially replace people who are picking the fruit because they do it cheaper, more efficiently, safer, what are the repercussions of that? And I especially think, Eszter and Lorenzo, you guys being so deep into drone education, how do you see kind of education fitting in, and do we train people so they don't need to pick the apples anymore, but they need to know how to either fly the drone or do the different overhead and maintenance that comes with these types of missions? Like, how do you see all this kind of unfolding in the years ahead?
I can take it. Listen, I have a good story. You're gonna love it. So I used to live in London. I moved out like 5 months ago. And in the last day, basically the Queen had an announcement. So she went out, the Queen is around 90 something, and she said there is a problem, what she want to talk about. And it was basically an agricultural problem that the fruits are not picked and they are all getting rotten on the trees. Mm-hmm. And basically the Queen had an announcement, asked the local people to pick the fruits. She even offered, I think, tax reduction and basically everything if they go out to the fields and help the farmers, solve this actually giant problem for the UK. Sorry. And, I think that answers to your question. People don't want to pick the fruits. So, and I think this is why robotics are great and drones are a fantastic solution because they're solving problems. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the key here. Like, there is no worry about kind of drones going to replace human, resources or human manpower, because drones going to replace tasks what humans don't want to do. So, for example, picking the fruits, and that's a fantastic example. They don't want to do it because it's not a pleasant job. It is in a direct sunlight. It's not a good thing. And I think that's one of the great opportunities for drones to come into the market. And of course, they are more productive, they are more cost efficient, and others. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, there are jobs which people don't want to do, more like they used to put themselves to unnecessary risk. Mm-hmm. For example, climb up to a rooftop or a tree, or swim in the ocean to save someone's life. And I think there's other great examples when drones can come into the picture, replace this unnecessary risk operations and saves lives. So I see it's a fantastic benefit for everyone. And coming back to your initial questions, yes, so that person gonna be a drone operator. They need to retrain themselves, re-educate, and the whole job market gonna be reshaped. But it's not a bad thing. That's innovation. Like before, we didn't have taxi drivers. Now we have taxi drivers because we have cars. So, this easy. I mean, maybe I am being here a little bit too futuristic, but, before we didn't have airplane pilots. Now we have airplane pilots because we have airplanes. So, this is easy to me, but Lorenzo.
I agree. I think you said it perfectly. I have nothing to add. I think this is a good answer. And I agree. I agree on the aspect of health and safety. I agree on the aspect of, filling a gap, right? Like the fantastic example of the UK post-Brexit and the challenges of having the fruits being brought in there. So those are excellent examples. I mean, absolutely.
And now the Queen going to be happy as well, Drone's going to be deployed.
Oh, we got to make the Queen happy. But I think sometimes that the anxiety question, this is like a trope, right? Like, are machines going to replace humans? I mean, we've lived with that for 100 years. We have movies to that record, but it's also, it's more a matter of like, is it going to replace this job today? If there's a ramp where it takes time to, let humans adapt and find new skills and new ways to fit into the equation, then there's no big deal. And I don't think drones, especially when you add the regulation component, they're never going to overnight replace an entire workforce of something. There's going to be an entire public conversation as they evolve. So, and honestly, we need to feed people more than we need to give them jobs if we're talking about list of priorities here. So this drone, I think, if this type of operation is able to scale, adding more food to the bellies on this planet is always going to be a positive thing.
Right, absolutely. Well, I know we're only kind of about 20 minutes left, so I want to talk a little bit more about DroneTalks and the DroneTalks Academy. So Eszter and Lorenzo, I think Eszter, we had you on the podcast maybe 3 or so months ago, and DroneTalks was up and running. But talk to us about the Academy and some of the courses that you guys are heading up over there.
Yeah, so very briefly, and after maybe Lorenzo as a head teacher, can complement my thoughts. So, we identified a problem again. And, this is what I'm talking about. You need to come up with solution which solves problems. So, I have this fantastic program management PR agency, and I hired people, and it was extremely hard. I'm not sure about you, Mike, or CJ, you experienced the same, but, I hired a perfect PR professional, for example, and but she had no clue about drones, and it took hours and hours and hours from my life to explain what is UTM, what is UAM, basically the basics, right? And by the time I explained, she changed her mind, and she said like, oh, you know what, I go back to, I don't know, to the food industry because it's easier, because I already know it, and these aviation drones are so complicated, and and I'm like, man, I lost 200 hours from my life.
We lost a salesperson that way one year. Yeah, like they joined the team, they were great, and then you could just tell they got scared after a month or so. Like, oh my God, this is an intimidating industry.
Same story. And you know, and I lost 200 hours when I could serve a customer and earn a bunch of money. You know, so and I'm like, okay, this is gonna go like this, and it's too big a risk for me as a startup. You know, which I cannot take. And end of the day, you know, this is how the idea come up. So I was like, probably a lot of other companies are in the same shoes. And, you know, let's kickstart an academic program for 7 days where we explain from zero to hero. I'm not sure. What the drone industry is about technology, hardware, software, regulations, stakeholders, you know, business models, investors' perspective. So basically we designed this 7 days program and we invited a guest teacher. So basically Lorenzo Murzilli is the teacher of this 7-day program, but we have guest teachers, startup owners, mostly CEOs from the field who teach a few classes, and they give real examples how they do, what's their business model about, or what's hardware, what's software, what's regulation. So basically we have guest teachers, we have Lorenzo, and it's a live course, so it's not like pre-recorded. There are discussions, there are Q&As, there are small group sessions. So it's maximum 10 people on the course. We design it really interactive, really small. And basically in 7 days, you can get on speed regarding the drone ecosystem. That's one of the course. And the other one, you know, when we put it out, we listened to people and they said, oh, it's great, it's fantastic, but I'm already in a drone ecosystem. I don't need to learn the basics. I want to know about the European Usespace Regulation. I want to know the latest, you know, I don't want to Google it, go everywhere. It takes hours and hours to get, you know, what's going on. So we designed another course for a 1-day executive briefing course. When you are already in the drone ecosystem, you just need to know what are the hottest topics and you want to have a discussion about it and learn what's going on in the world now. But I let Lorenzo to kind of deep dive to these two courses, but this is how the idea came up. And I should say that it's a really good initiative based on the feedbacks and what we received so far. So, yeah.
Yes, and I mean, to be honest, when Eszter asked me to do this head teacher, you know, is a big role, it's a big responsibility. Yeah, there's a professor. No, what was interesting is I was thinking back of the point that Eszter made is like, how cool it would be that if I have to hire someone, did someone come to me and say, hey, by the way, I have a drone diploma that says I know the basics. I'm not going to ask you what is UTM, right? I know what is UTM.
I'd pay them.
I mean, maybe I'm not John Rio, right, as Rios or PK, but I know what is UTM. I understand that. And if you say ICAO, I know that it is in Montreal and they do certain things, right? So the point is like to be able to not to, you know, provide this knowledge that is, I don't know, you want to be a drone pilot, like Part 107 certified, so you need a drone pilot certificate. It's not about the individual components that as a professional of a certain job, like I am a drone pilot, so you need to have, but it's really more about you have been introduced to the drone industry as an aviation specific industry, right? And so in the long program, what I thought about, okay, what could be the 4 modules that are a must, right? If I have to teach to my son, like what would be the 4 things you need to know? And what came up is like from first of all, you need to know about the technology, right? The technology is different enough from aviation, right? That requires a specific competence to be used there. And it is different enough from a generic software development company as well that requires a little bit of aviation injection. So this mix between aviation and software development, you know, in the way you think about technology is something that we wanted to do. So module on that, right? Then we have the second part is about, operations, because these drones are operated in a very diverse way. And it's surprising how little people know about how drones are operated, but in real life, like from real operators. You think about stuff, but actually you are very surprised of the kind of operations that are going on right now, the complexities behind them, the considerations that you need to have when it comes to, flying, from a risk perspective.
The sheer diversity of them. Yeah.
Most people to grasp that, it's in itself is another module that requires, attention. The third one is what we call like regulation and stakeholders. That is like, you would like, and this is to the point you made before, Mike, about, sometimes being delusional or naive, that you are, you can decide your own destiny, right? It's not exactly like that, because you are into an ecosystem with so many interconnecting parts, and you are operating in a common good, which is the airspace, that is not really yours. Right? It is only yours as far as somebody gives it to you to operate in there, and you have approvals and authorization. So we wanted to make this evident by making a regulations and stakeholder module that will actually make you understand that, for example, if your drone crashes, an accident investigation safety board is going to knock at your door and say, hello, I am the NTSB, and I'm going to do now an investigation according to IK 1X13, and you're going to have to open your doors to me, and I'm going to come in and look at all your documents, and that's what you need to do now, right? And you would say, like, I don't want to. Well, it's not your choice, right?
Yeah.
A stupid example, but there are a lot more like these audits, design organization approvals, all of the parts that have to do with regulation and stakeholders. And then the last module is about actually the reason why everybody is here, which is business, right? And like, what are the current viable business models? What is it the investors are looking for? What are the value creation, the value creation chain? Why everybody's talking about BVLOS at scale? What does it mean? Why do I need to have 20 drones per one pilot? What does that mean for the business, and so on and so forth, right? And so I thought at the end, say, if we have this nice package that is not taught by myself alone, but for each individual module by people that are not professors, but they're actually in the industry, and they come to be guests for us to share their knowledge, with our students, and then go back and do what they're doing well, which is, technology, operation, whatever. We thought that this would be, from a program point of view, from an educational point of view, very valuable for companies that then will hire these people, right? They're going to go in there, with this knowledge already there. So that's
And the one-day executive one is for drone professionals, aviation startup owners who already are in the field but want to know.
Exactly. This is the flavor there was slightly different because, from an executive point of view, you never have the time to do anything. Right? You're an executive, you're running around, and you don't want to spend 7 days into details about technology. But your problem is more like what I call situational awareness, right? How am I aware of what's happening in my industry? And
minimum viable knowledge about what's going on, so you can understand when somebody's trying to fool you, when somebody is being honest.
How do you see the business opportunity? How do you understand? Like, for example, we just now discussed about the Usespace Regulation. That's a huge impact on the industry. Right. And as an executive, you must know what that is about, right? It's not optional, right? And so the idea was to say, we do this like more compact, just one day. And the idea is like, I will basically be almost a solo teacher together with Eszter complementing. But the point is this solo teaching mentality linked to the idea of gathering the information, what's hot, right? And disseminating this, like, this is what you need to know right now. This is a briefing of, March or April in 2021. This is what matters to you. There is a European regulation. There is a Usespace regulation. The remote ID rule in the United States, ops over people, and so on, capturing what's hot, and then packaging it in a way that is executively understandable and actionable as well. Right? It's not just the details, but how do I action this? So those are the two things, and that we thought was actually missing from the offering that is out there as far as education is concerned.
I was going to ask if there's a whole module on acronyms for the drone industry. That was my first day.
There will be, you know.
There will be.
It's so true, right? It is incredibly true. I think many people die by acronym in our industry. It's so true.
Yeah.
And one more thought. We love Launchpad, so we want to offer a 20% discount for the Launchpad viewers. You know, I'm not sure where can we put this code, but DroneTalks 20. It's valid for 10 business days from now. Yes, so 10 more business days. DroneTalks 20. And all our courses can be purchased 20% off. And both courses has a maximum of 10 people because we believe in small group discussions than a big one.
Yeah, we could put that code in the description below the video. We could have it on launchpad.aero in the video description there. And actually, I'll type it in the chat right now.
Great.
So it was DroneTalks 20?
Yeah, with capital and DroneTalks 20, yes.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. That's awesome.
I have this great jumper. You know, actually, if you also seen this, it's a DroneTalks Academy jumper.
Yeah, I can see. Who, from what industries, I guess, have you seen the most interest in each of the two respective courses? Are there any trends that were a little interesting for you guys to see? You know, and in the executive course, was it a lot of people that have drone programs, they're trying to learn a little bit more, or is it usually somebody that's, you know, they've done their due diligence on the industry, they know they want a drone program, and now they're taking the next step before they start to do that, kind of take the steps in the implementation and launch?
Yeah, the way I see this is that I think the executive program is really more like, almost like a recurring. Like, so if you are an executive and you understand that you need to have that, you know, almost continuous education, you're gonna join the course, right? So the idea is that if you already have it because you are hard into the industry, you probably will not need it. So what we see is, I don't know, industries that are, I don't want to say peripheral to drones, but they are more like using the technology without having to necessarily understand all the aspects of it because they are within it. Like, so it's not really like a drone manufacturing company, but it would be more of a telco or a drone operator company that is needing to understand how, you know, that is. Of course, drone manufacturing company executive insofar as, for example, there are now new hires, right? So we have people that are being hired from, for example, traditional aviation, like manager of a continued airworthiness organization that is now coming into a drone company to help them shape up their, you know, production or maintenance, right? And they need that. So that's what we are seeing for sure. Okay. On the other side, I think we
have people from Thales, you know, for example, you probably know Thales who signed up. So we have people from aviation drones backgrounds who want to. So we have people, for example, people from America who sign up because they really want to know what's going on in Europe. It's you know, and we have people sign up from Europe because they really want to know what's going on in America because we cover both. You know, on the other hand, what I wanted to say, I think. It's also the networking part, which we forget to talk about. You know, you sit there with 9 executives in the same group. So, you know, if you just get business contacts 2 from that, you know, you already won 10 times more than the price was this course, you know.
Right.
So you know, I think the networking part is really strong. Aspect as well, because you are in the same live course for one day with other executive decision makers.
Yes, also this aspect of networking, and we forgot to mention on the other course, the academy, the longer ones, we try to find really guest lecturers that again don't make teaching their profession, but that are, you know, almost like coming in from their own industry to share their competence.
Real world practitioners. That's
practitioners that are really carving out the time where they're in their specific knowledge. And the idea of that is again creating this network where you can access, you know, people that have competence in the field, and that these people will remain part of your network through, you know, the platform that DroneTalks will put available to the students. so that these conversations can happen, almost like expert to expert, right? If I need to do, I don't know, what in Europe is the SORA approval, right? To get an operation, I do it with people that do that every day, right? Or if I need to understand the American regulation, I do it with, American people that know American regulation because they do that by, on a day-to-day working basis. And so we try to create this network, not only between students, but also, between students and the professor, the guest lecturers, and that will be part of the course.
And that's what it's all about. I mean, in order to grow this industry, I think this is great because it's on two levels. One, the education. So, that's something that we're a big proponent of, and it's kind of our core value is education. But then, also providing that kind of first step for people who are coming from the outside so that they don't get intimidated. Because once you actually understand the drone space, I mean, you never want to leave it because it's so unique and it touches so many different industries. Yeah. You don't feel like you'd ever be a part of something as important again.
So many different stakeholders, right? In the drone industry, from governments, local to federal to, at least in the States, we have the FAA, and we're talking now the FCC is involved, and then of course all the private entities involved, right?
And I think CJ will admit that he learns the most about the drone industry through the podcast, talking with all of these people over months.
But that's true, Mike and CJ, this is exactly the point. You can learn it on the job, right? This is obviously a good way, but doing it's clearly more intimidating because you are doing it on the job again. So you are actually working,
right?
And you are, so the challenge, and at the same time, the other thing was you don't want to spend 6 months, on a heavy, type of training. So what we try to do is to really say, what is the minimum level of understanding that people need to have of these topics to be able to then continue their on-the-job, learning, curve, but feeling confident, right? Again, the acronyms, the players, and then and the fact that you cannot escape. You cannot escape because when you are in a meeting. I mean, yesterday I was leading my the JARUS safety and risk management working group, and developing risk assessment and stuff. We have 50 people in the call, and for a moment I kind of disconnected myself and I was listening to the conversation, and I was like, this is impossible to understand for anyone that is not so deeply into the topic. It's like, an acronym, maybe 4 words, and the 4th word technical words. Like, how do you step into this?
Yeah, we've had people on the Drone Advisory Committee in the United States literally stop the meeting to say, like, I don't know what that means. Can you explain
exactly. I understand what you're talking about. So what we're trying to do is to make sure that people can understand a conversation in a drone advisory committee, right? That's kind of the kind of message. Is like, you're going to be able to understand the conversation.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Coming back to your sales guy who ran away example, is that you can be a perfect sales guy, a perfect marketing professional, perfect software developer, but end of the day, you need to work daily basis in a drone ecosystem. You cannot sell something if you don't understand the basics. You cannot develop a software. You can be the best software developer if you don't understand, the alignments, how things build on each other. You cannot PR a company. Even if you are the best PR, you cannot pitch a media partner if you don't understand what you pitch about, right? So this is basically the idea behind for a first hire one, and an executive one is a step up on that, I think. Right. And I think that's it.
And I love that it's not pre-recorded, and it actually wouldn't make sense to do that because the industry changes so often that content would be out of a little, not out of style, but it would be less relevant.
We thought about it. We thought about it.
Right.
Business decision, because we could kind of make a better business case if we do pre-recording sessions. And we thought no, and you know why no? Because we felt not enough personal. We are you probably not know us. We love community. We love people. We love having a personal conversation. We want to believe in this core value, at the moment until the industry is small and shaping super quickly and everyone knows everyone because you come to the course and your classmate gonna be maybe the next CEO of a next startup, and if you watch the pre-recordings and the other person watch pre-recording in another room, you're never gonna meet. So, you lost this community aspect, you lost this networking aspect. So at the moment, we want to be personal and we don't want to go there. I'm not saying in the future, maybe not, but at the moment, it's not the value. Yeah.
Well, great. And, again, thank you again for what you guys are doing. Drone education is something we're obviously extremely passionate about and, love to support you guys and we appreciate the discount code for the community as well. So we'll definitely share that out. We're kind of at time, so I want to thank everybody again for tuning in. If you tuned in live, thank you so much, Eszter and Lorenzo, for joining us. I know it's getting a little bit late in Europe, so we appreciate you guys logging on. We'll see everybody next week, same place, same time. So have a great rest of your week.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.